Well, first of all, Dean, thank you so much for inviting me today and a wonderful presentation this morning. It's been a real, very pleasant and eye-opening experience here for me for the last 2 days in terms of the discussions and the meetings, and I think particularly in the opportunity for a long-term collaboration between the two universities. And so today's presentation, I'm going to focus on some of the work that we've been doing in the area of lighting related to a human factors approach. Most of my work at the university is got a strong sustainability, green energy efficiency, carbon perspective. But we've learned over quite some years that a human factors approach is a much more effective way of advancing sustainability than just sustainability by itself. I mean, people don't typically buy, purchase, or are interested in energy. They're interested in quality, and they're interested in health and wellness. And so I'm going to introduce this effort that we've been working on. We've been working very closely with the UC medical schools, both at UC Davis and at UC Irvine, which are two of the larger medical research universities in California. Very forward-thinking. They have a very broad research program like you. And I'm very encouraged by what I saw this morning, and I think we should have the two systems work more closely together. So let's get into this. And again, just a little bit of background. UC Davis launched the Lighting Efficiency Sustainability Center about 25 years ago as a collegial agreement between the energy departments in the United States and in California to really address energy and sustainability issues. And again, I'm just going to touch on some of the background on this. California is one of the global leaders in sustainability. And it actually started from the Climate Action Plan, or the Global Warming Plan, that actually my professor put together more than 30 years ago. And California was the first place in the world to actually put a goal on greenhouse gas mitigation, and made a legislation that said we had to do it by legislation. It wasn't just by saying we're going to do good. They forced the country, the state, to do good. My university system, the University of California, has declared carbon neutrality. And carbon neutrality is an interesting concept. It's very brave, very aspirational. And so the 10 campuses in California are now required to go carbon neutral by 2025. The question is, are they going to be able to do it? And I'm thinking maybe. It's going to be a maybe issue here. And so California is sort of very dedicated to this whole sustainability. And of course the whole concept on buildings. Buildings are a big carbon generator, and a lot of interest in what we can be doing in buildings. And so, for many years, California was looking at how do we invest in this. And so we set up regional centers across California to address specific topics of sustainability and efficiency. And this is the construction of my center some 20 some years ago. And I have a great staff of engineers, architects, designers working in this. And what I basically do is research on how lighting can contribute to efficiency, but also to wellness and health and vitality. We do a lot of demonstrations. We work with municipalities, doing lots of demos. But my main area of interest is how do we use light for well-being. And this is one of my students actually working on design for assisted living. And so this is actually a full-scale prototype that we have at my center, where we're exploring how do we modify living facilities so people can live in comfort and quality in their homes and not in the hospital. And so this is, and so we're really learning about how does spectrum and light impact quality of life, and how can we accentuate quality of life, not just vision, but the whole concept of wellness. So we've been evolving what we've been calling a circadian protocol for buildings and for hospitals. And so, what is circadian? And circadian is about the day, okay? And it's the idea that our biology is basically wired for this. Our biology expects to see bright light during the day and expects to see a very different spectrum at night at a much lower light level. And so we've evolved for this kind of condition. But by and large, the buildings that we live in do not do this. Okay, and this is contributing to all kinds of issues. And so I want you to remember this picture here, because this picture is essentially very similar to this picture here. And what I'm showing is the diurnal changes in melatonin. And they basically mirror the dynamic changes in spectrum and lighting intensity outside. And this, obviously we've evolved, and the kinds of dynamic changes we see in ideally in melatonin do this. Now, when I went to school a few short years ago, what I learned about lighting was basically for visual access, for navigation, to be able to read, write, and for visual acuity. But there's a whole secondary layer associated with light that impacts our biology, okay, and it affects our hormones at a very fundamental level. Essentially melatonin, which is a foundation hormone that affects all of the other parts. And so this biological pathway, my advisor at Berkeley was actually, started a lot of this early research more than 30 years ago, looking at how light affects our fundamental biology. And so the issues today are, as we move to solid state LED technology, which is now the predominant technology that we're using inside our buildings, our hospitals, and our homes, this technology is primarily driven by what's called an internal blue pump. And so there's a blue generator that then makes white light. Okay? And in today's hospitals, all new design and all major retrofits are all LED based. Okay? Now, the fundamental problem on this is that if you look at the spectral distribution or the color signature for LED lighting, is we get this blue signature, peaks in the blue, and then it goes out into the full visible spectrum. The peak of the blue pump also corresponds with the melanopic sensitivity. These things coincide. And so this is both a benefit and a detriment. Okay? And so what it essentially means is that typical blue pump LED is very effective at suppressing melatonin. So again, it's a good thing or a bad thing. Now at nighttime, it's a bad thing. Okay? And so a number of years ago, the AMA, American Medical Association, which is a very conservative, careful organization. They don't say much. Okay? They're a very careful group. They came out and said essentially that light at night is not good for us, dangerous. It was an extremely brave and strong statement from this. And again, the prevalence of LED technology, the fact that we all spend endless hours on computers and cell phones at night, this is disrupting our melatonin. And it's not just affecting our sleep. Because it's a foundation hormone, it's affecting a lot of other things. So this statement by the AMA caused a huge reaction throughout the design industry, the hospitals, all looking at, we made some serious mistakes relative to how we put light inside spaces. And so just borrowing from some of this, turns out that the 400 to 600 nanometer range, basically the blue, is very effective at suppressing melatonin. So you think of sunrise. Sunrise, we start moving very quickly into the white blue light. We want to suppress melatonin in the morning. We're waking up, we're going to work. But you don't want this at night. Okay? These colors over here don't suppress melatonin. So we spent a lot of time looking at the sort of the fundamental science on this. And there's a lot happening in this graph, but what I'm basically showing here is intensity of light. Okay? And I'm showing melatonin suppression, lots of suppression. And so what they did is they took a large cohort and they exposed them to all kinds of different light levels, and they measured melatonin suppression. And what it turns out is that this kind of nice, cozy home environment that we all enjoy is basically not good for us. Yeah. And so normally I think, oh, it's okay, I'm at home, I've got nice low light, but this is very typical living room lighting. Okay? Now everybody responds a little bit differently in here. Some people, tremendous suppression in the living, some people almost none. But by and large, it's having a tremendous impact on us. And living room lighting is not good for us. Okay? So about 10 years ago, the Honda Motor Company came to Davis and they said, we would like to build a model home to show off our electric cars. And they came to me and they said, would you design the home, make it super efficient? And I said, on one condition, I want it to be the first circadian house in the country. And they asked me, what's circadian? And because they had a lot of money, I knew I was going to have a great time. You know. So we built this. And this home has got all the energy efficiency and the solar and the electric car, all that kind of stuff. But it included the first fully circadian design where we got to experiment, we got to look at different technologies. And what this led to is this UC Davis circadian protocol. And I'm going to touch on different elements today on this. And basically what we learned from the experimental work that we did with the Honda House and with the hospitals, we got this basic protocol. Now, I'm not going to go through all the different kinds of the parts of the protocol, but I want to show you by example what they involve. Because there's not a lot of super secrets on a circadian protocol, because basically what we have outside is very close to what we should be doing for our spaces. And we're really not designed for light at night. So we want light during the day, and we don't want light at night. It's pretty straightforward. So in the Honda House, what I did is I used a lot of bright white surfaces to allow daylight to sort of fill the environment. And the architecture people know about this kind of thing. They're very skilled at this. So lots of windows and fenestration to allow penetration of daylight deep inside the spaces. It's well known in hospital design that you want daylight well into the spaces. We know that people spend less time in hospitals for the same procedure when they're exposed to lots of daylight. Not a lot of secrets in this. What I also did was I put in a tunable LED lighting system that would allow us to mimic both the intensity and the spectral changes that would normally occur throughout the day. Okay? So at nighttime, you want a very low light level with very low blue content, which is basically amber kind of light. And during the day, you want a very bright white, high blue content to suppress melatonin. This is a very straightforward kind of thing. Now, in addition to this spectral and intensity capability, I also put in a secondary layer of deep amber lighting for wayfinding. Okay? And it was in the lower hemisphere because the melanopsin receptors in the bottom of your eye. So I wanted to reduce exposure to light, so put the amber light low. This allows for navigation at night so that we don't do two things. We don't disrupt the melatonin, and we don't bleach the rhodopsin. Okay? And I'm going to get to that in a minute. This worked very well. People really liked it. We've applied this at UC Irvine and at UC Davis for the new hospital is going to include this. We've done experimental deployments. Actually, in the Honda House, in the master bedroom, someone would get up in the middle of the night, a sensor would see them, it would then turn on an array of amber lighting so they could take a pee in the middle of the night, okay, without turning on the lights. If they chose to go down to the kitchen, this amber light would come on and the stairway lighting would come on and it would be amber light throughout the space without having to turn any lights on. We're using this as a directive now for the assisted living design and also for retrofits of senior housing. Again, why amber? So amber is kind of a fundamental approach here. One is that amber lighting, if you take normal 4,000 Kelvin lighting like we have in here, it's got very high, it's got 68 melanopic flux per 100. It's almost 68% suppressing melatonin. So if you use this kind of light, you're about 70% suppressing melatonin. But the same amber-based, it's only 8 melanopic flux, so you're only 8% suppressing melatonin. So to look at this graphically, this is your melanopic action spectrum. This is light that suppresses melatonin. The amber spectra here only clips one part of it. It's mostly non-melanopic. Okay? So and then if you look at a standard 3,000 Kelvin, it's very heavily concentrated in the melanopic region. Now, I started this research before the melanopsin receptor was discovered. And what we were doing was we were focusing on dark adaptation. So the work I was doing at Berkeley, and my professor was working on what was happening relative to why we were seeing this. This was pre-melanopsin. And we didn't understand exactly what was going on, but we understood very clearly about dark adaptation. And so dark adaptation refers to the idea that we build up chemicals, principally rhodopsin, to allow us to see at very, very low light levels. And this process takes about 30 minutes. My students take about 25 minutes, and as you get to be 40, 50, it takes a little bit longer and longer. And for older people, it takes quite a bit longer in terms of adaptation. This is critically important for navigation in hospitals. When people get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, they'll turn the lights on, they will bleach the rhodopsin in their eyes, and now they are visually blind going back to the bedroom. And so it turns out trips and falls are a major cause of death and injury for people 65 and older, and I'm sure that happens here. And so this single slide presentation to our director at the hospital got instant action because trips and falls are a major deal in hospitals, and I'm sure they are here. And so we dug through the research on this, and of course, trips and falls for ages 65 and older, major problem. And the thesis now is that this is happening at night. It's happening because older people are going to the bathroom more often at night. They're turning on the lights, they're tripping and falling. So again, this has nothing to do with melanopsin. This has to do only with rhodopsin. And so if you look at amber red lighting, it's very far away from rod function. So if you want to light a space, you don't want to use white light at night. You want to use amber-based light at night because it only has a very small amount of suppression on rhodopsin. And so to illustrate what this slide shows, if I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom here, I'm visually blind going back. And I still remember my father going to the bathroom at night, and he'd carry a flashlight with him. And I'd ask, what's with the flashlight? And he said, I can't see. Because normally you turn on all the lights. This bathroom, however, because of the amber light, allows you navigation inside the bathroom at relatively low light levels, not suppressing any of the rhodopsin. Now, we did all this work before melanopsin, but the two fit very nicely together because we're not suppressing melatonin and we're not bleaching rhodopsin. So it's a really good method. So I've been working with your counterpart very closely in Davis. So our hospital people come and they're very interested in this. The trips and falls were a major driver on this. They weren't quite convinced on the melanopsin, but they were on the trips and falls. And so we worked with UC Davis is building a large new research hospital. And they came back and they said, we would very much like to explore the circadian protocol to apply it to this new hospital. So we have a whole series of protocols here, which I can go through later. And they basically adopted about 70% of what we had suggested. So we have a full-scale lab where we have patient rooms. This is not a real patient room. This is actually a laboratory where we're exploring the application of different spectra and for amber wayfinding. And you can kind of see this is at a very, very low light level. Okay, it's very difficult to take a picture. But you can see that the wayfinding in the bathroom is very, very clear. There's enough light for the nurses to come in to do what they need to do without turning everything on. There's enough light to be able to get to the bathroom. So this is a slightly higher exposure. And we did a deployment of this at a hospital. And what we found out is it actually saved energy because people were not turning the lights on in the bathroom and leaving them on. If you go into a hospital, at least in the United States, if somebody turns on a bathroom light, it's on all day or on all night. Okay? With this, we can leave this on 24/7. We save energy. The nurses and the patients prefer the light. And I'm going to get into some of the preference based on this a little later. But because amber light is low color temperature, it's related to, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But basically, it's something that we're naturally attuned to. Our biology is wired for this. At evening, we're wired for this. Okay? So we're also doing this in corridors. So we are doing this in patient rooms and bathrooms. We're also doing this in corridors. And the idea here is we want a daytime, nighttime corridor, because one of the big complaints from the nurses was that, and I didn't get this from the doctors, I got this from the nurses, was the light from the corridors, because everybody knows a real hospital is super bright white light. Otherwise, you're not really a hospital. You got to have tons of white light. Is pouring into the patient rooms. And the patients, it's so bright. So what we wanted to reduce the circadian disruption. We also found that when we did amber lighting at low level in the corridors, people stopped shouting in the corridors. Now, I don't know what happens here, okay? And I'm sure the corridors in your hospitals are super quiet. But in the United States, the corridors are very noisy. It's a business, and people are you know. So we found that when we moved over to lower light levels, people started whispering. So basically, this is labs where we're testing all kinds of different amber lighting. And we actually, we developed the technology, we work with the manufacturing partners. None of this stuff is super expensive, okay? And so this is we've done all kinds of deployments. This is actually a dormitory. Turns out, we go through the literature, all the diseases start in college. Because if you go to the library at UC Davis, and I've done this, at midnight, the libraries are jammed with students on their computers under 4,000 Kelvin light, drinking coffee or Coke, okay? And they wonder why they're having problems sleeping and that they're getting fat. Okay, so all these problems start. And so our university is very interested in what kind of interventions. So they said, what would you suggest? And I said, close the library at 10 o'clock. No, can't do that. Okay. But the idea is lighting interventions in dorms and hospitals. So we're doing various flavors of this in the new hospital. This is the test wing at UC Irvine, another university. And these are all various management vice chancellor types congratulating themselves on the circadian lighting deployment. But basically what we're doing is this kind of thing where the light moves from a very bright white light, which you want during the day, to a very warm, lower level. Okay. So while we were doing this, one question came up from the medical staff, and they said, we get the idea of the trips and falls and the circadian, the melanopsin, but can you use spectrum or color for stress? And this was sort of in the time of COVID, and there was a lot of issues with stress. And the hospitals in California were under enormous problem during COVID, and I'm sure you had some of this similar here. Hospitals were operating in full panic mode. Okay? So they asked us to look at this. And so stress in medical facilities. And so part of the stuff with COVID was they found that there was a relationship between stress and poor outcomes with COVID patients. And there was a lot of interest in, what could we be doing in these kinds of environments, particularly in pre-op surgery for children. There's a huge, big problem. And so the idea was, these kinds of environments obviously very, very stressful. And I'm working with the chair of radiology, and they have great difficulties imaging people who are stressed out. And there's some of the procedures that they can't do because the patient is so stressed out. And what happens, and again, this is your business, but they were saying that we're introducing all these chemicals and we can't get good results because they're stressed. We really need help. And so the question came up, can we use color to reduce stress? Okay. So I reached out to my community, to the color experts and the people, and the basic answer was maybe. And even if there is, it's going to be very difficult to measure. Very difficult to measure. But please try. Okay, so please try. So the idea was, could any of these colors? Now I still go back to the evolutionary models. There's tremendous impact on color and melanopsin. So we were thinking that is there a relationship between calmness and color? We went through the literature. The literature is filled with nonsense. Okay, with purple lighting will make you taller, or green lighting will make you smarter. There's all kinds of stuff like that. There's and most of the research of the science, when you drill into it, is very thin, and most of it is very opinion. And it's very observational, and it's fraught with experimental errors, and none of it is controlled. There's no controlled studies. So we decided to take this on, and I partnered with the Center for Mind and Brain. And the director of the Center for Mind and Brain is across the street from the Lighting Center. And we've always shared parking, but that's all. So we reached out, we said, can we work together? They were very interested because they have a very robust protocol for doing brainwave monitoring, looking at stress and looking at alertness. So they have a protocol for doing this. They're doing a lot of work with PTSD. They're working with people with Alzheimer's. They're working with people who have different mental disorders, mapping brainwave patterns. And so they said, we'd like to work with you because we have no idea about light and color. So it was a great marriage. What we built is we built what's essentially an integrating chamber. And this was a room where we could introduce any spectra known to man, or any combination of color. So we could have white light, we could have amber light, we could have purple-green light, you name it, we could do it. And it was a very expensive system. It was about a $50,000 light bulb. Okay? And it was all programmable, and we could control the distribution, the intensity. And so this is basically, in my business, this is the field of opportunity for color. So the International Color Society will say, this is how the human visual system works. Okay? And this is all the different colors. So I have the ability to produce any kind of color within that system. So what we did was, this is very expensive to do these kinds of studies, where you've got a controlled study and you have students in a cohort, very expensive. So we couldn't do 20 colors. We couldn't do 10 colors. We ended up doing 5, okay? Because it's extremely expensive. This was, this first run was more than $100,000 just to do a controlled study. So what we did was, we did blue, amber, red, green, and white as the control. Okay, and so we had 5 PhDs in the room, and it took us a week to decide on 5 colors. Next time, only 2 PhDs. Okay, so it was very argumentative. Now, there was some rationale on this. It was suggested strongly that somewhere in this mix, there would be one color that would create calmness. That was the thesis, okay? So what we did is we wanted to get a broad, so we got red, we got blue, we got green. We wanted to do amber because we had such great results on the melanopsin, okay? And so what we did was the Center for Mind and Brain uses the EEG, where they do brainwave scanning, to look at alertness, stress, brain activity. And the director there has kind of written the book on how to do brainwave monitoring. He's quite well known in this area. And this was our postdoc that worked on this. And basically, the approach on this was to take students and measure brainwave patterns, okay? So here's the question, is that we're interested in stress, right? So we have access to an endless supply of 19-year-olds, okay? Just like you folks have. And so what we want to do is take this large cohort of 19-year-olds, stress them, and then expose them to different spectra. So the question comes up, how do you stress 19-year-olds? Okay? So my boss, my dean, comes to me and they say, how did you stress the students? And I said, Dean, it's very easy. We have a very reproducible technique. It works every time. The electric shocks are so good. So my dean goes, oh my God. Yeah. So what we did, can't use electric shocks, okay? But there's a lot of science out there. And you know, at every university, there's always an expert in something, okay? So we found a person that was very expert on how to create stress, public speaking, okay? So public speaking ranks up there with spiders, snakes, deep fear. Now, if you ask a professor, professor, I love getting up in front of groups of people and speaking. So the professors doesn't work so well. But for 19-year-olds at a university, very effective, okay? So what we did was the protocol, and there's actually published research on this and what protocol to follow, is that students would come in, they would be a television camera, there would be a very glary light, okay? A podium, and they were having to do an impromptu speech on the pros and cons of their current department, and this would be submitted to the chair for review with their name, okay? So we confirmed the stress with cortisol measurements. So some students, they weren't stressed. Some students were in tears, Some students couldn't complete because they were so stressed. So we stressed the students. I'm going to just run through this a little bit. So students would come in, and they would wait for a period of time. We would start wiring them up. We would tell them what they would do. They would then go into the space. They would do their speech. We added a mental arithmetic math test on this. They had to add up a bunch of numbers, which I would fail at. And then they would go into the integrating chamber and recover, and then they would leave. Now, each student only saw one color because you can't stress a student twice. Because once you stress them, they got it, okay? And so there was a blue group, a green group, a blue group, and a white group. And that's how we did this. And so basically what they were doing on the brainwave monitoring is that they were measuring the relative fractions left and right to determine levels of stress. So this is the first 30. We did the first 30. And I'm going to walk you through this in terms of what. So this is coming in. Now they're starting to prep, and they're getting wired up, and they're being told this is what's going to happen, okay? Now you can see they're starting to get stressed already, just being told. This is what happens with 19-year-olds, So, and here, they're actually starting the speech, okay? And you can see the stress comes down. Now, different groups get different levels of stress. Now, what's really interesting in this is the brainwave pattern showing stress. It starts to recover here during the speech. Why? So what you all know, have gone through this. You're doing your first lecture, first of the year, or you're doing your first speech out in public. You're really super nervous. But halfway through the speech, you're good. You're cool. You've got it, okay? And you start going, I know, this is good, okay? So at this point here, when they finish their speech, they go into the integrating chamber, okay? Now, the white was kind of confirming, okay? This is like someone's walking down the street, they trip, okay? They start recovering, brainwave pattern comes up to neutral, left, right, just normal neutral. So the white was very confirming on the first cohort, okay? The red didn't do much. There was a little bit of negative on that. There was a little bit of benefit with blue. There was a pretty nice benefit with green, but there was a very robust effort with amber, okay? Now, we had statistical significance between amber and white, but not with anything else. Because understand, this is only 30 people, well, 30 19-year-olds, okay? But it was very encouraging with the 30. And so what we did is we got more money at that point, So we said we're gonna expand this. So this is now up to 70, okay? The same kind of dynamic, okay, where they're getting stressed, you're getting the stress, they're starting to recover. The white comes back up to near normal. Less of effect with green on this one. Again, we have a larger cohort. Green is starting to reduce. Not too much with the red and the blue. Still a very nice impact with amber, and it still shows a continuing effect. Now, we stopped this at 30 minutes. And so initially we were looking at, well, if you're going in for a procedure and you've done the procedure and you can accentuate or accelerate the recovery over 30 minutes, that's a good test. But this might persist for quite some time. We don't know, okay? But this was very, very encouraging at 70. Now, if you normalize the data to the onset of recovery, this is after they're finished their speech and they're starting to recover. And this is the kind of thing clinically that you'd be interested in. Someone, they're going in for chemotherapy or they're going for surgery. It starts here. This shows still a pretty sustained effort with amber and less of an effect with the other colors. And then if you look at, there's quite a nice benefit relative to white. Now, this is not melanopsin. Melanopsin is a hormone. This takes time. This is instantaneous. This is happening right away. So something else is going on this. So I always like to look for evolutionary analogs on these kinds of things. And if you look at something like this, when we see amber, low color temperature, it's typically we're winding down in the evening. Okay, and so I call this the monkey effect. We're all afraid of falling, right? And that's because the monkeys that had fear of falling out of trees survived and bred and were the result. Okay, so we are wired. The thesis now is that we are wired for this. When this happens, our physiology is designed to calm down. That's good for us. Okay. So that's the thinking. I mean, the mind and brain people have got all kinds of ideas. They don't say no to my evolutionary argument. They say maybe. Okay. But I think that I always look for evolutionary analogs on these kinds of things. So where to go with this? And so we've done about 100 19-year-olds. Okay. So now we're getting kind of overwhelmed with the gerontology people. They want it for gerontology. The ER people want to put it, we want that. People with mental disturbances, they want to work on that. We're even getting interest for animals, So we think kind of the clinical applications, there's deep interest from the radiology people on these kinds of things. And we're actually, if you look at this picture, they're projecting a nature scene on the wall here so that people will calm down, right? I mean, for those who have done these kinds of things, they're very stressful, very, very stressful. And this is just conventional white light. And so these people are very interested in this. And the radiology people at UC Irvine are putting this into their spaces as we speak. And I said, wait, we only have 100 subjects, and they're all 19-year-olds, you know? But so they're putting in a separate layer, white light, and then a separate layer of amber lighting so they can switch between the two. I visited many many imaging spaces. Some people have residential lighting, you know, table lights. Some people have Christmas tree lighting, you know, a Christmas tree. I'm sorry, it's not Christmas. You know, they're going to be doing nasty things to you, right? So deep interest in this. When you dig into this, blue is very typically used for these kinds of devices. So I'm inquisitive, and I want to find out why they use blue. And basically, it's decoration. It's just to grab the color out of the air. So we're working with the MRI companies now, because to replace blue with amber, it's about $15. You know, and there's no downside, you know. Sort of more on the facility side, this is just a mock-up. One of my students did kind of mock-up. And so, and these kinds of spaces here where people are you know, getting infusions, very stressful. Okay? And relatively easy to do this. Okay, relatively low cost. These folks are very interested in this, and both in the ER and pre-op surgery. They're very interested in this because people are sitting there not happy, very stressed. And this is relatively easy to do. This isn't that complex. Again, this is not real. This is just a mock-up. But what we're doing is showing these folks that this is easy to do. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So in all this work that we're doing with circadian lighting, I'm working very closely with the dean of the nursing school and also the head of nursing at the hospital. And one of the big issues is what we do with night nurses that work at night. And so the whole circadian lighting issue, or melanopsin disruption, was really discovered from shift workers. People who worked at night were suffering from all these medical issues, and there must be something going on there. And that's where this whole thing happened. And so the issue with night nurses is that you get a lack of coordination relative to day and night. So well known when you go through the literature, sleep disturbances, higher rates of diseases, all kinds of issues. So they were very keen on the development of the new hospital, is what could we be doing also for nurses. So if you go out to, and again, this is in the United States, if you go out to the nursing stations at night, this is what they look like. Everybody's quieting down. It's, you can be sure this is their day. So their day, they're not getting adequate melatonin suppression, not entrainment. In other words, a circadian lighting system needs to be entrained. It needs to see, we're wired to see daylight. So what night nurses are seeing is this. And so this is what's really hurting them. Nurses need to see this. And what they're seeing is this. It's totally backwards. And so when you look at the action spectrum on this, is that there's precious little light at nighttime for night nurses, both in terms of intensity and spectrum. So the university asked us to study this. This is actually a full-scale section of the new hospital nursing station. And this is where the nurses would sit, and this would be where their computers, and we built a flexible ceiling, and we built a whole lab just for the nurses. Right? And we studied all kinds of lighting systems that would produce high levels of melanopic flux that would be protected from the rest of the hospital, so it wouldn't be lighting up patients. And so this is kind of a vertical wall of light that gives you kind of a daylight light appearance. Now, it's not daylight, but nurses are working at night. There's no daylight, so we had to produce something very, very similar. So in this lab, we have the ability to introduce all kinds of different light, study it, bring in nurses, and do all these studies. Now, the interesting problem on this, it's a non-homogeneous cohort, is that if you go into a hospital, the night nurses are all not night nurses. Some of them are night nurses, some of them are day nurses, some of them are neither. And so what to do? It's a big problem. So we thought we were very clever with this. We could put in high levels of daylight at night for them, solve the problem. Problem is they're not it's not homogeneous. So what we did is we came up with this solution here, was day nurses working a night shift. So it turns out this happens quite a bit, where a day nurse will say, I'll work tonight or tomorrow night, and then the next night I'll go back to normal schedule. So in this condition here, we can provide low melanopic content. So these are nurses, they need to be able to see, but you don't want to suppress totally, okay? Not a perfect solution, but it's better than the one they've got. And so the idea here is that this kind of low melanopic content would allow them to work a couple of nights without completely suppressing the melatonin. So it's basically, the lighting system has got a dual DNA. We can have high melanopic content for normal nurses are working at night, and this is low melanopic content. The third big question that came up on this, who knows who's day or night, right? Very complex. So what to do? So I said, what we're going to do is we're going to put all this in and worry about it later, basically. I said, you want the DNA to be there because we can microchip this so that when someone comes up to a station, that light comes on to whatever they might be. Now that solution is 5 years out. So we're going to put this DNA in so that the nurses have access to both. Now, the facilities people came back and they said, no, too expensive. And I said, you have no idea how much it is. It's still going to be too expensive, okay? So I said, okay, just put in the high melanopic content, okay? That would be the backstop. But we're going to be able to do both. And the both will give us this kind of range of opportunity for nurses. So they can either individually control or microchip control on this. We're also working with the nurses to sort of understand what do they want. The nurses are all powerful in UC hospitals. And so they want something, they get it, okay? And so I've been it's been very effective for me because I just go to management and say, I don't want it, the nurses want it, okay? So these are all my bosses, okay? So faculty at Davis has many bosses, okay? And they're all building a new hospital here. So the new hospital, research hospital, very interested in this. And the total protocol that we're doing is we have the dynamic lighting in the patient room. We have sort of full level control, so we can change that. We have amber wayfinding to get to the bathroom, low level evening lighting. Very important having high color rendering, full spectrum light sources, and a dark night. Dark night means you can have black inside the room. I went out to the hospitals. I couldn't find one UC hospital that had an evening night protocol. Nobody had one. And when I asked, they said, what's that? And I said, that's a room that has no light so that the patients can sleep. And they said, oh, okay. So that's the protocol.